Power is rarely lost on the battlefield. It slips away in silence, in chambers filled not with swords, but with whispers. Think of Julius Caesar, not defeated in war, but surrounded by men he trusted, undone by a kiss on the cheek and a blade slipped between his ribs. Or recall the Medici rulers of Florence, whose power collapsed not because enemies stormed their gates, but because betrayal was seated at their own tables. History's most powerful men were not destroyed by strength, but by traps they did not see until it was far too late. Machiavelli understood this truth better than anyone. In The Prince, he did not teach rulers to fear open war. War can be prepared for, enemies can be crushed. What he feared most were the traps of manipulation. When appearances twist reality, when loyalty is feigned, when desire blinds judgment, a ruler loses not because he is weak, but because he is deceived. And if kings and emperors could be brought to ruin this way, what chance does the modern man have when he walks blindly into the psychological snares set for him? Men today imagine they fall because women overpower them, when in reality, they are undone by their own predictability. They walk into traps willingly, traps crafted not with swords, but with words, emotions, and illusions. They seek validation, they argue, they sacrifice, they project. They confuse surrender with love and predictability with loyalty. And once they are caught, they are no longer sovereign, they are subjects. This is the paradox. A man believes he is winning her love, when in truth, he is surrendering his freedom. He believes he is securing stability, when in fact he is building his own cage. The power struggle does not take place on the surface, but in the invisible world of psychology, a battlefield of appearances and manipulation where most men do not even realize they are at war. Machiavelli's warning is timeless. The ruler who does not see the trap is already its prisoner. And so it is with men and women today. If you fail to see the game, you are not playing, you are being played. Every empire begins to collapse the moment its ruler starts craving applause. The same is true for men in their private lives. The first psychological trap women use against men is the trap of validation. It seems harmless, even sweet. A woman praises you, admires you, or gives her attention, and you feel strong. But the moment your sense of strength depends on her approval, you are no longer a man of power. You are a performer. Machiavelli warned rulers to never rely on the love of the people, because love is fickle. Fear and respect endure, but affection evaporates. A ruler who seeks validation from his subjects is already their slave. Translate that lesson to modern life. The man who seeks constant approval from a woman becomes predictable. He adjusts his behavior, tones down his voice, compromises his will, all in exchange for her smile. She may not even do this consciously, but the dynamic is clear. He gives up authority, and she gains it. Notice how this trap works. At first, she admires you for your strength, your independence, your confidence. That is what attracted her in the beginning. But once she senses you need her validation to maintain that strength, the game flips. Suddenly, she controls the very thing you thought was your essence. If she withholds approval, you feel weak. If she gives it, you feel powerful. Like a puppet pulled by strings you don't even see. The tragedy is that most men mistake this for love. They tell themselves, I just want to make her happy. But beneath that lies fear. Fear of losing her approval, fear of disappointing her, fear of silence or disinterest. That fear becomes the leash, and once it is attached, she can lead you anywhere she wants. The Machiavellian man sees this trap and refuses it. He understands that respect is built on self-sufficiency, not on neediness. He does not measure his worth by her praise or her criticism. He knows that true power is to be unmoved, to stand firm whether she adores him or ignores him. For the man who does not need validation cannot be manipulated by it. This is the first trap, and it is the one most men never escape.
The second trap is one nearly every man falls into, the trap of argument. Men believe that reason will win. They imagine that if they just explain themselves clearly, if they fight point by point, the truth will prevail. But Machiavelli knew better. He warned that appearances matter more than truth, and that wasting energy in disputes drains authority. When you argue with a woman, you step into a battlefield designed for your defeat. Words are not used to discover truth, but to provoke you, destabilize you, and force you into reaction. The moment you raise your voice, the moment you try to win, you have already lost. Because what was once power in silence has become weakness in noise. Worse still, argument almost always leads to the third trap, emotional reaction. A sharp word, a calculated silence, or even tears can pull anger or pain out of you. At once you reveal your emotions in the heat of conflict, you hand over your weapon. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must appear composed even when burning inside, because fear and respect flow from control, not from raw feeling. The man who erupts has already surrendered control. Think of it this way. When she provokes you into defending yourself endlessly, who really holds the power? She dictates the terms of the exchange, sets the frame, and pulls you away from your focus. You, in turn, spend energy proving what never needed to be proven, and in that process, your strength is chipped away. The strategic man understands that argument is a trap because it forces you onto the wrong battlefield. Instead of wasting your words, you keep your silence. Instead of reacting, you let the storm pass while you remain unmoved. This silence is not weakness, it is sovereignty. For nothing destabilizes a manipulator more than a man who refuses to play. Remember this, every argument you enter costs you a piece of your authority. Every argument you refuse strengthens it. The naive man wants to win debates. The Machiavellian man knows the greatest victory is never being drawn into them.
The fourth trap is one of the most dangerous because it hides behind the noble mask of love and loyalty. Men are taught from childhood that if they sacrifice enough, if they give endlessly, if they prove their devotion, they will earn respect. But Machiavelli would laugh at such naivety. Respect is never purchased through sacrifice. It is only maintained through strength. This is the illusion of commitment. A man believes that by locking himself into loyalty, marriage, sacrifice, predictable devotion, he is securing stability. In truth, he is building his own cage. What once made him attractive, his freedom and individuality, is traded away for the illusion of security. She may thank him for it, but she no longer desires him for it. And slowly, the balance of power shifts. Consider how Machiavelli warned rulers never to become predictable. A prince who shows all his cards, who binds himself too tightly, becomes easy to control. The same principle applies in relationships. The moment a man becomes entirely predictable, he ceases to command respect. Commitment mistaken for strength becomes the very source of weakness. Trap 5 grows out of this same illusion, the belief that marriage equals stability. In truth, marriage often removes uncertainty, and with it, the tension that kept desire alive. Predictability may calm the man, but it bores the woman. She now holds the advantage because she knows he has nowhere else to go. He has tied himself to the mast, believing it will keep the ship afloat, not realizing It only ensures he will sink with it if the waves rise. This is not to say that loyalty is worthless, but Machiavelli would insist loyalty must be chosen from a position of power, not from fear of losing. The man who gives everything to buy permanence will discover he has bought chains instead. The man who remains free, even within commitment, never loses respect, because he could walk away at any moment, and she knows it. The illusion of commitment is seductive because it promises safety, but safety is the opposite of power, and the man who builds his life on safety will always live under someone else's control.
There is a reason generals in war feared spies more than soldiers. Spies operate in shadows, using confusion and doubt as their weapons. In the private battles of men and women, the equivalent weapon is emotion. The sixth trap is emotional leverage, the subtle shifting of moods, the sudden withdrawal of affection, the tears that arrive at the exact moment you try to stand firm. Most men underestimate how powerful this weapon can be. They assume strength means holding their ground in physical or financial terms, but they collapse the moment her emotions destabilize them. A sigh, a silence, an accusation, and suddenly the man who thought himself in control is backpedaling, apologizing, surrendering. He is not reacting to reason, but to the pressure of her shifting moods. Machiavelli wrote that appearances shape reality, and in emotional leverage, appearances become the battlefield. A woman does not need to prove you wrong, she only needs to make you feel wrong. Once you are trapped in defending against invisible accusations or calming storms you did not create, you're already defeated. The energy that should be directed toward building, creating, leading, is wasted on regaining her temporary approval. The danger lies in repetition. Once she realizes that a change in tone, a strategic withdrawal of warmth, or an outburst of tears can move you, she will use it again, not always consciously, but inevitably. And every time you bend, you reinforce the pattern. Soon, you are no longer leading the relationship. You are managing her emotions, which means she is managing you. The strategic man sees through this. He understands that emotions are not commands. He does not react to every storm, nor does he race to restore balance every time it is disturbed. Instead, he holds his ground, steady and calm, while the waves crash against him. His authority comes not from controlling her emotions, but from mastering his own. This is Machiavelli's lesson for modern men. Control is never lost because the other side is stronger. It is lost because you reacted. The man who can remain composed in the face of emotional leverage cannot be moved and therefore cannot be controlled.
The seventh trap is perhaps the deepest of all, because it is not set by women directly, but by men themselves. It is the trap of projection, the tendency of men to place their fantasies, their ideals, their illusions onto a woman, granting her power she does not inherently possess. Schopenhauer called it nature's cruel trick, the illusion that a single woman can complete you, save you, or give your life meaning. Machiavelli would view it more coldly, as the most predictable weakness a man reveals. Once you project the fantasy of the one onto her, you no longer see her as she is. You see her as the embodiment of your dream, and a dream is impossible to resist. This projection gives away all power. Suddenly you tolerate disrespect, overlook red flags, and sacrifice your focus, because you believe she carries the key to your destiny. In truth, you are handing her a crown she never earned. And once she senses that you cannot live without her, she holds more power over you than any ruler holds over his subjects. History shows us the danger of this delusion. Entire kingdoms have been destabilized because rulers believed their passions were destiny. Kings who fell in love with mistresses destroyed dynasties. Leaders who mistook desire for fate lost both their crowns and their nations. It was never the woman alone who caused their downfall. It was the projection of power onto her that blinded them. Modern men repeat the same error. They scroll through images, chase ideals, and convince themselves that finding her will bring completion. But this illusion enslaves more effectively than chains. A man who believes salvation lies in another will never be free. The Machiavellian man rejects projection. He does not elevate a woman into myth, nor does he degrade her into nothing. He sees her clearly as she is, capable of beauty, capable of manipulation, but never the source of his destiny. His strength lies in knowing that no one outside himself can define his purpose. Projection is the most dangerous trap because it feels like love. But it is not love, it is blindness. And blindness is the surest path to ruin.
If the naive man is trapped again and again, what then is the path of the strategic man? Machiavelli gives us the answer. Never play the game by the rules your opponent sets. The man who sees through traps refuses to be predictable. He does not chase validation, he does not argue, he does not chain himself through blind loyalty, and he does not drown in emotions or illusions. Instead, he cultivates opacity, the art of being unreadable. The naive man exposes himself. He explains, defends, reveals, and commits, thinking this transparency is virtue. But Machiavelli warned that rulers must learn to appear one way while remaining another. Strategy demands that you show what strengthens you and conceal what weakens you. The man who is silent where others argue, who is calm where others rage, who is free where others cling, that man becomes untouchable. This is not coldness, it is discipline. The strategic man still loves, still enjoys, still connects, but he never hands over the keys to his sovereignty. He knows that respect is not gained by begging for it, but by living in a way that commands it. He knows that silence in the right moment carries more weight than 1,000 words. And he knows that the power to walk away is the foundation of every relationship worth keeping. Think of it as two worlds, the world of the naive, who live reactive lives, forever responding to emotion, argument, and illusion, and the world of the strategic, who understand that power is preserved by restraint, by control, by presence. The difference is not in fortune or strength, but in awareness. The one sees the trap and steps into it. The other sees the trap and walks around it. The Machiavellian man chooses clarity over fantasy, sovereignty over surrender, and composure over chaos. He becomes a man who cannot be cornered because he refuses to play the game of the predictable. And in doing so, he discovers a truth few men ever realize. The less you react, the more powerful you become. Now comes the question only you can answer. Will you keep stepping into the same traps, or will you rise above them? Every man has a choice. Most will keep chasing validation, wasting energy in arguments, sacrificing themselves for illusions, and projecting fantasies onto women who never asked to be their saviors. And in doing so, they will live as predictable prey, always reacting, always losing, always wondering why they feel powerless. But a few will see clearly. A few will understand Machiavelli's timeless lesson. Power is not taken from you by force, it is surrendered by blindness. Once you recognize the traps, you begin to see them everywhere, in relationships, in workplaces, in society itself. You realize that most men are not defeated by others, but by themselves, by their need to be liked, by their fear of silence, by their inability to walk away. Ask yourself, are you the man who bends at the first sign of disapproval, who explodes when provoked, who chains himself to illusions in the name of love? Or are you the man who commands respect through restraint, who keeps his composure when others lose theirs, who never hands over the keys to his freedom? Machiavelli's reminder is simple but brutal. Power is preserved by control,
never by reaction. A man who cannot master himself will be mastered by others. A man who refuses to see the traps will always fall into them. But the man who rises above, who lives with strategic awareness, becomes the kind of man this world cannot control. The final challenge is not to women, not to society, but to yourself. Will you keep being predictable, or will you become untouchable? The choice is in your hands. And once you choose, you will discover a truth Machiavelli knew centuries ago. Sovereignty is not given. It is taken by discipline, by vision, and by the courage to walk alone if necessary. If you remember nothing else, remember this. The game is always being played. The only question is whether you are the player or the prey.